Welcome to Comics Bazaar, the channel of comics commentary and arcana. This video features Uncanny X-Men number 166, cover dated February 1983, and this is a double-sized issue. This really is the climax of the Brood saga that has lasted almost a year to this point. It's Paul Smith's second issue on the Uncanny X-Men, and there's 40 pages of Paul Smith art inside this comic, and it's good value too at the time, $1, whereas the normal price for a comic at the time was 60 cents. So you're getting double the story pages for only 40 cents extra. That's pretty good value at that time. The cover by Paul Smith and showing the X-Men there with Lilandra up against the Brood. So what's interesting about this one to me is that the figures are a little stiff, slightly stiff, compared even to Cockrum's shot of the team in the corner box, but very well drawn, very clear. And another thing that I observe is that the Brood are smaller than Cockrum drew them. So you can see here in particular, this one that's biting Wolverine's shoulder there has got to be pretty small. So little differences like that. And one other detail I like on this cover is the fact that Lilandra is actually wielding a lightsaber there. So there you go. Let's open this one up to the first page. And the story opens on a planet called Madrazar, farther from its sun than Pluto is from Sol. The sky remains the same day and night, eternal, infinite darkness, strewn with the majestic array of stars that form the core of the Milky Way galaxy. So there you go, Claremont enjoying himself with the prose there, and it's nicely worded, fine diction, it's poetic, it is suitably grand for the epic story that is about to unfold. So the Brood are after taking down a massive Acanti. So we learned the name of this star-spanning species in the previous issue. They are great, gentle, sentient beings who, legend says, have roamed the spaceways since creation. So we've got a slave master and a hunt master Brood conferring here about the Acanti. And what has been introduced into it is a slave virus, which is destroying its reasoning centers, its higher reasoning centers, its conscious mind and self-awareness have been destroyed. But then suddenly there's a blast of light there, and the question is, what's happening? So let's turn the page and see. Wow, what an amazing double page spread by Paul Smith. And we've got our title of the story here, Live Free or Die. Creative team, Chris Claremont scripter, Paul Smith penciler, Bob Wiacek inker, Tom Orzechowski letterer, and Glynis Wine back on board as colorist. And that's amazing. We haven't seen Binary for a couple of issues. She blasted out of Lilandra's yacht at the end of 164, thinking that the X-Men were dead because of the queen embryos growing inside of them. And so she was out for vengeance. And here we see her taking that vengeance. And just look at the arc of her flight there, where she's punching through these structures that house the Brood. And there she is. What a glorious shot of her. Great work by Paul Smith. You can definitely see some Paul Smith influence on Jim Lee as well. Like the pose on Binary there is very much the kind of pose that Jim Lee would draw on the likes of Rogue, let's say, later in his run. And I also really like the way that the Brood's kind of structures are modeled on Wasp type structures as well. It's nicely done. And yeah, there we go. We're into this story. Let's see Binary in some more action against the Brood. And this is a great page here as well, where we just have a few words by Claremont. The Brood resists, and we can see them there firing at Binary. We see a number of panels here with no dialogue, no narrative captions. Binary is just going about her business, destroying them for all the good it does them. And this is something that I observed in my video on 165, that Claremont now with Paul Smith is pulling back from over dialoguing and over narrative captioning the art when he deems it, in my opinion, that the art tells the story. He's prepared to pull back on the words. looks very good. Use of screen tone there in the background as well, effective use of screen tone by Bob Wiacek. So Binary here, having destroyed the brood, communicates with the Acanti. She says to the Acanti, be patient, I'll have you off those barbs and on your way in a jiffy. But the Acanti's response is a shriek of mingled agony and despair. Then, telepathically, she tells Binary what was done to her. So Binary is there thinking they communicate in song. This one's voice is a ragged shadow of its true self. Yet I've never heard anything so beautiful. Releasing you won't do any good, will it? She says. The effects of the brood virus are irreversible. There's only one way you can become truly free. Is that what you want? The answer is yes. And the Acanti's wish is immediately granted. So Binary euthanizes the Acanti and thinks to herself, that's another life the brood owes me. And she's not happy with her transformation anymore. All she's done since is what she did before as Carol Danvers: fight, kill, survive. There's no joy in me anymore, she thinks, only grief and hate. The brood helped make me what I am. It's a mistake they'll live to regret. And so it would seem that she's just going to continue on with her destruction of the brood, the planets they've colonized, and so on and so forth. But there's a big surprise on the turn page, and it is that she runs into Storm, or rather Storm's astral form. Going my way, says Storm. And that surprises Binary. This is wonderful. It's crazy. It's impossible. I thought I'd never see you again, she says, that you'd either be dead or transformed into a young queen of the brood. And Aurora responds cryptically, in a sense, Carol, I suffered both fates and neither. So Binary's looking for an explanation. And Storm says, in true Claremontian fashion, I'm not quite the woman you knew, and not all my changes have been pleasant. So she explains about the astral form, that the X-Men are with her, and Binary's going to stand with her friends. So here it was revealed in the previous issue that somehow Storm is physically, or rather she's bonded body and soul with this Acanti. We're going to get a little bit more explanation. So, in fact, the Acanti that was being enslaved by the brood is known to Storm. I heard her death song. Had you not, Carol, I would have to spare her from becoming one of the brood's living starships. And then, Storm is continuing to explain here. Remember those changes I mentioned? This is the most dramatic. So we get this really cool shot of the inside of the Acanti's mouth there. This would appear to be a big tongue as well. And there is Lalandra's yacht moored in the mouth of the Acanti. So also really weird stuff here too. In the side of the mouth of the Acanti, there's a little blister. And in that blister, Storm's body is being remade. So we see it there with the musculature and some of the bones there. So it's kind of in a fetal position, and it is being grown out of the inside of the mouth of the Acanti. So really great imagination from Claremont, and Paul Smith doing a great job of bringing it to visual realization in the art. So Storm continues her explanation to Binary here about how the embryo that was implanted in her tried to hatch, but it didn't. And now Binary's reunited with the X-Men. So that's a nice horizontal panel there, showing all the X-Men and Lalandra with all their various heights, accurately drawn and measured by Paul Smith. And also there's a bit of banter there about Carol bursting out the side of Lalandra's yacht and the explosive decompression that the X-Men had to deal with in the opening of the previous issue. And Kitty then explodes. She says, I don't understand. Why is everyone cracking jokes, acting like nothing's wrong? We've been murdered. We all carry queen embryos inside us. When they hatch, we'll turn into sleazoids, and there's nothing we can do to prevent it. So this is true. And the question is what to do next. Wolverine says, maybe we can't stop these transformations set by dying, but we can make sure the sleazoids never pull this stunt with anyone else. That's what he wants. He wants payback. In the previous issue, Cyclops and Lilandra were agreed, but Storm has a completely different proposal here. She says the stakes here are far higher than mere vengeance. She offers the X-Men and Lilandra a chance to return true to our heritage and ideals, to save lives rather than wantonly destroy them. So we're going to get a very dense couple of pages of explanation from Storm regarding the Acanti and their polar opposite relationship to the Brood. So I'll go through a little bit of that with you in the video review because you need it in order to fully understand the themes that Claremont is developing and playing with in this double-sized issue. So Storm here says, for as long as life has existed in this universe, there have been Acanti roaming intergalactic space in their endless pursuit of knowledge, serenading the stars themselves, doing none harm. But there exists in nature a cruel symmetry and necessary balance between all things, positive and negative, light and dark, good and evil. So that's a motif of all of Claremont's work, most particularly his 16-year run on his first run on the X-Men, that balance of light and dark, good and evil, which is in nature, but also in the soul of individuals too. If the Acanti are benign, continues Storm, the Brood are their opposite. Their origin is unknown. They came to the Milky Way ages ago, perhaps fleeing some cosmic catastrophe or a war they had lost. To them, the Acanti, with their natural ability to fly faster than the speed of light, were a godsend. Why build a starship when you can enslave one? In their first terrible hunt, fate dealt the Acanti a vicious hand. Among those stricken by the slaver virus was the prophet singer, leader of the Acanti, caretaker of the soul of the entire race. So long as he lived, the Acanti did not desert him, but even his eventual death did not end their torment. Normally when they die, Acanti hurled themselves into the heart of a star. In the case of the prophet singer, this is essential, for unless his body is consumed, the Acanti racial soul, carried in his charge, cannot be released, to be passed on to his successor. And without that soul, the Acanti as a race cannot survive. However, when the prophet singer died, the Brood grounded him on this system's third world and turned his rotting corpse into their throne city. And we've seen that corpse in a previous issue of the title and rendered in a fantastic double-page spread by Dave Cockrum. So this is really interesting stuff from Claremont. He's writing like a mythology here, a mythology for these creatures, most particularly the Acanti, that are like a cross. They're like a cross between our dolphins and whales, like blue whales and dolphins is what they're like in some regards. So let's get past the ads here. And Storm continues, so we get a nice profile shot of Storm. One thing to note, and I'll note it actually after I go through the dialogue here regarding Paul Smith's art and his visualization of Storm. So the soul remains trapped within the carcass, and the Acanti remain bound to it, doomed if they leave, doomed if they remain. Then, after aeons in bondage, the survivors, the pitifully few Acanti who had managed to elude the Brood, hunting cadres, were swept by a burst of hope. A prophet singer, the first in generations, had been conceived. So, this is the baby here. The mother was the one that was enslaved at the beginning of the issue and euthanized by Binary, but the child was given premature birth to, and that's the one that happened upon Storm, and that Storm bonded to. So we're told here, they bonded me, the Acanti accompanying the young prophet singer, they bonded me into physical and psychic rapport with the infant. I provide the awareness, the conscious direction, the will necessary to sustain him until his own mind develops sufficiently to handle that responsibility. In return, his body's natural healing abilities restore my body to health. And that's what's going on in the inside of the mouth of the Acanti. So just really great imagination from Claremont here, like wild stuff, and really cool. I mean, like, who puts that level of imagination anymore into corporate-owned comics it was Claremont who was doing it back in the 80s, and doing it because he really cared about these characters and was highly invested in them as almost real people. And what I wanted to say about Paul Smith's visualization of Storm is you can see her nose here in profile, and also here in this direct shot of her face. He's drawing her nose wider and a little flatter than her design by both Cockram and Byrne. So Paul Smith drawing Storm a little bit more in respect of her African heritage, different from Cockram and Byrne. So just a little detail there to note. So Storm says, now I have an opportunity. She's talking she still feels guilty about killing the queen embryo within her. So she says, I destroyed the queen embryo implanted within me. Now, however, I have an opportunity to save an equally helpless life, to give instead of take. And what I do for one, the X-Men might do for an entire race. If we can release the soul so that it can be passed on to this child, he can then lead the Acanti to safety. So there is a redemption arc available here for the X-Men. Instead of payback, they can help the Acanti. And how about that? Even though the implants are still within them and they're still expecting to die. So everybody's agreed, and Cyclops sums it up. I think we're agreed on this, but how to best accomplish that objective? So, this is typical Cyclops strategist. He's thinking strategically. Okay, so that's our goal, but how do we achieve it? Suppose Storm and Binary create a diversion to draw as much of the Brood's attention and the battle fleet as possible away from the planet. Simultaneously, the rest of us beam down to the skeleton to make a run for the soul. If we keep Lilandra's yacht here inside the baby, the ship's shields masking it from Brood sensors, they'll have no idea the X-Men are involved. We could finish the job before they're even aware of us. And that's the plan that they ultimately do go with. So he puts it together super quick. And now there's an interesting little bit here with Wolverine and Cyclops butting heads. Sounds feasible, says Wolverine, but I'd prefer it if Carol and I did the dirt side work while you and the others stay up here with Storm. And the reason is Wolverine's concerned that they all seem normal now, but that could change anytime, anywhere. If it's in the middle of this caper in a firefight, it could make all the difference. And Wolverine proves right in his concern regarding that possibility. But Cyclops says, okay, so why not cover yourself before you even begin? You've got claws, Wolverine, use them if that's how you feel. Kill us now. So this is it. This is the moment that Wolverine has been preparing for and dreading. This is the moment I've been waiting for and dreading. He thinks, I can't save him. I swore I'd see him dead before I'd allow their metamorphosis into sleazoids. Each second I delay increases the risk that I'll fail, so why do I hesitate? And so we've got a great sequence here at the bottom of the page. The close-up on Wolverine's face, that look on his face as well. They're my friends, he thinks. Cyclops challenging him. What'll it be? His hand there, hesitating, but the claws pop. Typical Glynis Wine or Oliver. Colouring job there. The moment of violence or prospective violence, the background coloured red. So he thinks, and because they're my friends, I owe them life or a quick, clean death. And I like the way that the panels are getting smaller until we've got that close-up on Kitty Pryde's face as she exclaims no, and she gets in the middle of them. She says, Logan, I know what's happening inside me. I've never been so scared, but I'm not going to give up. Maybe this is a hopeless fight, but I won't quit. And part of not quitting means standing beside my fellow X-Men, all of us together to the end as a team, Logan, a family. If we mean anything to each other, if being an X-Man means anything, this is where and how we prove it. So that's agreed then. And Cyclops gets back to the business of the strategy. He overrules Wolverine's objection to the plan. We'll use my plan, he says. And Storm is going to remain on the Acanti ship. She says, my human body is still in critical condition. It might not survive the strain of providing a distraction. If it does not, my consciousness will remain trapped in this form. So there are stakes for Storm too. I hate to ask this of you, but should it become necessary for us to call on those abilities, Storm says, I cannot place this child in danger, Scott, but aside from that, I will do what must be done, whatever the cost. Okay, let's continue. Wow, this is another great double page spread here with these long horizontal panels. A day later, 7 billion miles closer to the sun, the explosion of a massive sonic boom heralds the Prophet Singer's arrival in Brood World's atmosphere. An interceptor squadron, a mix as they're all Brood units of inorganic and organic vehicles, immediately gives chase, but it's a futile effort. They can match neither the infant's speed nor his agility. In a matter of seconds, he reaches the skeleton of his long-dead ancestor. Then with a taunting, contemptuous flick of the tail, the Acanti soars spacewards. And the yacht is out. You can see it there. It's flown out. While within him... is it the yacht? No, sorry, that's a Brood interceptor. While within him, I received the approval of the Acanti elders, says Storm, before agreeing to Scott's plan. But suppose something goes wrong, if I fail, it will mean the destruction not only of this innocent child, but of all the Acanti's hopes and dreams. And yet, what real alternative have we? So those are the stakes. Lilandra tells them it's time to go, to get to the transporter room. So they're moving. That's a nice side shot of Wolverine running towards the transporter room. Yeah, and all the relative sizes of the characters all in the correct measures there. Nicely done. So they arrive to the transporter room, and there's an interesting little bit here where Cyclops demands of Lilandra, have you checked your calculations? Accuracy is essential. The slightest error could materialize as inside the planet or hundreds of feet up in the air. And Lilandra says to him, if you're afraid, stay aboard. And I really like this piece of dialogue from Claremont for Cyclops. I'm a careful man, Magistrix, he says. I don't want any of us hurt. I like that. That's good. A nice use of screen tone there in the background by Bob Wiacek. And then down they go to the planet. And the Acanti Prophet Singer is out into space. In the Royal Hive, though, the Great Mother is quickly appraised of the situation, and then she gets a communication from someone that she doesn't recognize. Majesty, beware, you're being deceived. Who speaks? She asks. Do you not recognize one of your own progeny? While your fleet chases the Acanti whelp, the X-Men have descended to the planetary surface below the throne city in an attempt to free the Star Singer's soul. None of them can monitor my telepathic comlink with you, and they remain unaware that my transformation has begun. They still believe me to be their trusted comrade. Shall I slay them before they suspect? So one of the X-Men is turning into a Brood, but which one? So the Queen says, no, they're, after all, your beloved sisters. Maintain contact. Daughter, be ready to strike when I command. So the Brood Queen commands one of her hunt masters to assemble a commando force. She's going to lead it. One of these tells her that the X-Men are in the Catacombs. Creatures exist there who prey on us as we do upon the Acanti. And we saw that in issue 162 or 63 when Wolverine was there on the planet on his own. I offer a choice, Huntmaster, says the Queen. Face their wrath or mine. So a team will be going after the X-Men. Meanwhile, and here they are, down in the Catacombs. That's a nice upshot of the team there. Nice angle that Paul Smith has pulled off, and they're going down. Wolverine says, Storm telepathically keyed me into the soul's quote-unquote scent. My enhanced senses are already locking in on it. Stay close and stay ready, he says. The plants are just as dangerous as the animals, and the twilight darkness of these tunnels works in their favor. So, at that moment out in space, the Brood are catching up on the Acanti, the young Acanti Soul Singer. They've got it on screen there. That's a nice image there of the Acanti on screen. But suddenly, there is something moving between them and the Acanti, and it's binary. It's a great shot. Binary blasts that ship to smithereens. Really nice effect there of her photon blast. Yeah, cool image from Paul Smith. Binary draws first blood. So Storm is thinking Carol was trained as a warrior, as were Wolverine and Lilandra. Killing is a fact of their lives, a necessary reality. To me, though, it is anathema. I hate the Brood with every fibre of my being, yet still I must find another way. So Aurora's perceptions subtly alter the universe as she sees through the eyes of the Acanti soul singer, primal natural forces within Storm, which Storm shapes as a sculptress does her clay. She's tapping into the constantly shifting patterns of energy in space. She goes blind with pain, senses an awful tearing deep within her, as her still healing human body is pushed far beyond its limits, yet she does not relent. At her command, lightning flares star bright in the darkness to stun a Brood ship and all aboard. So that's the difference between Binary and Storm there. Binary destroys a Brood starship, but instead Storm simply blinds them so that they can't act. So that's the distinction between them. And then down in the Catacombs, we've got a nice group shot there of the X-Men tackling these other alien creatures that live beneath the surface. And at a certain point, Kitty is grabbed by some strange creature, and then her training takes over and she phases through the wall out of the creature's grasp. But because the others are so busy, they miss it. Let's continue, because we're going to see where Kitty ends up. So she falls through the wall and ends up in a nest. And in that nest, one of the eggs is broken open, and she finds in the nest too these bones recently cleaned of the Brood. So the Brood have a predator on the planet. This is a nest, she thinks, with eggs in it, and one of them's cracked open. Great. Those sleazoids look ripped to shreds. If whatever lives here can do that to them, I shudder to think of what it can do to me. So why stick around? So she airwalks away, blissfully unaware that she's being watched and followed. So who or what is this creature? And then we're back out in space. Now somehow or other, the Brood get the better of Binary, and they bind her with a snare line, and they're dragging her towards our way with their ships. We'll bring her before the Mother Queen to be used as a royal host, they say. They're attacking the Soul Singer that's bonded with Storm. And then in this panel, some familiar voices. Thust thou recognize yon energy patterns, Christopher? I certainly do. Alert the others, Raza. Tell them I think our quest is nearly over. So the Starjammers are arriving on the scene in the nick of time. It's been searching for the X-Men for weeks. True to form, they've arrived in the proverbial nick of time. But turn the page. That is to save Storm. But what about the X-Men down in the Catacombs? So they're blasting away, and Wolverine's thinking there's something up with Cyclops. He's thinking here, the longer this fracas goes on, the worse Sykes' shooting gets. He's missing all but the easiest targets, like his mind knows how to use his optic blasts, but his body's forgotten. His instincts are gone. If I could only catch his scent, that'd clinch my suspicions. Bingo, he thinks. And then he lunges at Cyclops and pulls his visor off. And then we see Cyclops is the traitor. He's the one who's transforming, metamorphosizing into the Brood. And what a horrifying look at his eyes and mouth there, and that grimace on his face. So then, this is really intriguing. He blasts both Colossus and Wolverine. And Lilandra makes the point his metamorphosis has given him voluntary control over his optic blasts and a much wider arc of fire, because he can send a blast that way and that way too. And that's intriguing because it means that, Cyclops, that's potentially a course of development for him, that maybe he could ever gain control of his optic blasts, and maybe he could do things like this. And maybe that's something that could be done for him as a character by way of developing him and making him even more formidable, rather than having his optic blast as a kind of handicap unless he's got the ruby quartz lenses. So the X-Men then are attacked from behind and zapped by the brood hunter cadre that was sent down into the catacombs on the Queen's orders. So now everybody's down and they're going to ascend to the Royal Hive. But we catch up with Kitty and she's running for her life. That's a really good shot of Kitty running there. Nicely done and diving here. Paul Smith doing really well on Kitty in particular out of the X-Men, doing a version of her that is as good as, if not better than Burns. She's lost her way in the catacomb tunnels and she falls to the ground, and the Brood arrive with their weapons pointed at her. So they've got her in their grip and they're threatening to, they're going to bring her alive and unharmed up to the Queen Mother, so that the embryo in her can hatch and she'll metamorphosize into a young queen. But then something clears its throat and that gets their attention, and then they're really alarmed by what they see. And this is great, the page turn here. What is it? It's a dragon. And great sound effect in the background, the roar of the dragon. Tom Orzechowski's lettering there. Glynis Oliver with the red colouring, a little bit of screen tone in there as well from Wiacek. Really great page. So the Brood flee, but the dragon belches out fire and they're burnt to ash. And Kitty's just shocked by what's happened. That's a great page. Fantastic. And then I wish this had happened on a page turn here. Would have been even cooler, where the dragon, who looks huge here from the art, is actually teeny tiny, the size of a cat or a dog. I don't believe this. Are you real? Are you friendly? Asks Kitty. You must be. I'm still alive. And then something happens. The side of the wall of the catacomb seems to blast open. That blaster shot punched a hole through the wall this Brood fires at them and then punches a hole in the wall, and something shining is on the other side. It's some kind of cavern. It's so bright in there, so beautiful. And the Brood says, no, it burns, it burns. What are you talking about, says Kitty. There's no pain, only music calling to me. They disappear into the blinding radiance, and seconds later the silence is broken by a scream. So remember, what were they down there doing? They were hunting for the soul of the dead prophet singer. So it seems like they found it. Not far away, we have the X-Men. They're all manacled and bound. Cyclops is the only one free, but then Scott starts struggling against the Brood and uses his optic blast against the Queen, and Wolverine takes the opportunity to make a move. So he moves into Cyclops' optic beam. He takes the force to knock off the manacles that were binding him. I moved so a glancing blow from those beams of Sykes would trash my shackles. He thinks if I'd caught a full blast, I'd have been nothing but pulp and adamantium bones. It was an all or nothing long shot, my kind of gamble, he thinks. And you can see that he's taken a beating too. So Cyclops is struggling. Wolverine punches him out and now threatens the Queen with popping his adamantium claw into her brain. So he tells the Brood to drop their weapons, and they do. Now release the X-Men, he says. So let's get past these ads. And then the X-Men cover Cyclops' eyes with his visor while the shackles are used to bind the Brood warriors, who are then left behind as our heroes continue on through the catacombs. And they arrive at the cavern with the blinding light of the soul of the dead Acanti soul singer. And Kitty emerges, and she says that the soul judged him, the Brood that went in, as it does all who behold it, and found him wanting. So that Brood was turned to crystal right before her eyes, and she felt the same thing would happen to her, but it didn't. So she's unharmed. Colossus is delighted to see her. That's a great drawing of Kitty there. Paul Smith doing a really good job of drawing Kitty as a 14-year-old girl. He's got that nailed, and that's difficult to do. So she says she's asking about the little dragon. By the way, anyone see a little critter flying around here? Nope. Why? Oh, nothing's important. Nothing important. Now the Brood Queen wants to go into the chamber too. X-Men, you're flesh of my flesh. Where you go, so shall I. Look at Lilandra there with her lightsaber. And in they go into the crystal cavern. And what happens is the Brood Queen says, fascinating. Evidently I'm capable of corrupting even this holy of holies. So remember, the Acanti and the Brood are opposites. And so it seems are my children, because that little kind of dark ooze is also emerging from the foot of Colossus as well. So Wolverine shouts, out of here, everybody, before it's too late. And then the Queen stabs Wolverine in the back with her stingers, which also exude venom, but he cuts them off. My own fault, he says. Should never have turned my back on you or left your fangs intact. Won't make this mistake twice. But he's dropped because of the poison. His healing factor's kicking in. And when he pulls himself together and looks, he sees everyone struggling on the floor of the cavern, kind of in a halfway point between metamorphosizing or not metamorphosizing. So once again, Wolverine fears that he's going to have to kill his teammates, and then he says he's going to kill the Queen with his last breath. And then we get, just in the nick of time, Binary arriving to pull him out of there. So he tells her, quit playing about, woman, can't you see what's happening? She says, trust me, Logan, I know what I'm doing. You look awful, old friend. And he responds, feel worse. Rest easy then, she says. I'll have you aboard the Starjammer and under Sikorsky's care as soon as I'm finished here. But Wolverine selflessly says, forget about me. Save the others if you can, save the Acanti. So the Queen says, how noble, Wolverine. Slay me if you can, slay your precious X-Men too, for they cannot be saved. It will avail you naught. A final royal embryo exists, and when it hatches, your world is doomed. So who on earth is the host for the final royal embryo? Carol Danvers ignores the Queen as she remembers Storm's instructions and reaches out to touch her one special corner of creation. As Wolverine and the Queen watch, Carol becomes an eldritch creature of light and fire, a living star. And I like the way again that Claremont leaves this panel silent. Her celestial radiance reflected and amplified by the crystal cavern until finally she's generated enough power to release the Acanti's soul, and there it goes, and it's reunited with the young Acanti soul singer. The union of soul and living prophet singer is once more complete. The Acanti are at last free. So that took a lot out of Carol, but the X-Men too have been purged of the Brood embryos. And Binary says, I think the soul took care of things for us by purging the sleazoid elements from their bodies. And instead of corrupting the Acanti, it seems the Brood Queen was made as pure as that which she was sworn to destroy. So there she is in that crystal type form, purified of her evil. And so now we're at the end of the issue, 3 pages to go. And what we have here is the planet starts shaking itself apart. And so Binary calls in for them to be transported up to Lilandra's yacht. She's using a very Star Trek looking communicator there. So they're beamed up, and Kitty's thinking about the dragon. I wanted to find him to make sure he was okay, to thank him. Now I won't even have a chance to say goodbye. Not exactly, Kitty. A few moments after that, Sleaze World itself is rather abruptly removed from the celestial stage, so it explodes. Sometime later, in the Starjammer's medical bay, we've got like a funny moment there with an impatient Sikorsky and Wolverine. And then we've got Scott and his father, Christopher, reunited here. And Christopher asks his son, something bothering you? And Scott responds, true to the ethos of the X-Men, Sleaze World destroying a planet even unintentionally, is hard to live with. It ought to be, says Christopher, even when it's intentional. You balance the lives saved when Sleeve's world died with those that would have been lost had we done nothing and allowed the Acanti to continue to be hunted, the brood to expand, and you pray you did the right thing. And it's an interesting thing too, because remember in Uncanny X-Men 136, when Dark Phoenix destroyed the world of the star that was the star for the world Dabari, the planet was destroyed and 5 billion lives were taken, and it was the case then that Lilandra subjected Phoenix to a trial for those deaths. But in the case of the brood, those deaths of those sentient beings on that planet, well, this is the justification of it here in Christopher's speech. And then there's a surprise, which is that Storm is once again back in her body. So the process was completed and everybody's delighted to see her in her corporeal form again. And she explains that the young soul singer Acanti asked me to stay with the Acanti. For all his newfound awareness and maturity, he's still very much a child, my child, she says. But I found I did not want to leave you, and so he let me go. So that's a really nice shot of everyone there. The X-Men, the Starjammers, Lilandra too, and Binary, of course, as well. And Kitty asks Aurora, will we ever see the Acanti again? Perhaps, kitten, in our dreams, she says. So Corsair says it's time for a celebration. Hepzibah agrees, but Wolverine is the party pooper. I hate to spoil things, people, but it ain't over yet, he says. What do you mean, Logan? asks Scott. And Wolverine gives the bad news. Before she died, the Queen boasted about another royal embryo, one that directly threatened the Earth itself. I figure there's only one person who could be hosting it, Charles Xavier. So, the main battle is done, but what about Professor X on Earth? To be concluded in 30 days as the X-Men meet the New Mutants in the Goldilocks Syndrome. I do hope that you enjoyed this review and commentary on Uncanny X-Men 166, double-sized, 40 pages of Paul Smith art, an excellent story by Claremont. Let me know your thoughts about this issue in the comment section to the video. If you enjoyed my review, please like the video on YouTube. It really does help the channel. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more content like this.